There's a lot of problems with the 5e system. I don't like how easy characters can heal back up. All they have to do is to take a long rest. And then all the damages and injuries they have are fully healed back up. I don't really like the itemization system. I think it's kind of lacking. But instead of addressing like these actual problems with the game and trying to focus on making the game more enjoyable, they instead want a pat on the back and people to say, congratulations, you fixed race relations in America by changing a board game. I'm not kidding, like I have seen these people talk on Twitter. I have seen game developers on conventions, and they're literally thinking they're changing the world by modifying their game. These people are mentally insane, in my opinion. Like, you take a serious issue from the world, such as race relations in America, and you trivialize it to the point that you think if you change a board game, it's going to impact the real world, and you're going to make a difference. Like, on how many levels of fart sniffing can you be in order to believe something like this? And right now, like, a lot of brands are doing it. They're changing some names or they're changing their logos or something like that, as if it has any impact on race relations whatsoever. These people are mentally insane, which is why it's toxic to work with them. Which is why the moment they are partaking into this ideology, skilled people leave their company in droves, and then you end up with non-talented, non-skilled people. And you can look at Marvel Comics. It's not the stories that suffer. It's also the print. Like, there is ink coming out of the print, I hear reviewers say on YouTube. Or with Magic the Gathering, like the cards, the quality of the cards is going down. And it has to do with the fact that the skilled people cannot work with these bigots. I mean, if I was at the company and they would be like, oh, let's change the flavor text in Magic the Gathering, you know, like cards such as destroy all black creatures, oh, don't you know they're racist? I would be like, what on earth are you talking about, man? Are you on some sort of drugs? Are you on an LSD trip? And if I would voice my opinions like that, I would be fired. And if I were a person that's actually skilled and talented at the craft, they would deprive themselves from my services just because I don't think like they do. I don't think that a flavor card on Magic the Gathering causes racism in real life, okay? But alas, here we are. And these changes that we're going to watch, you're going to notice that they're actually a net deficit towards the game rather than a positive. And we're going to explain why. But first of all, I want to mock and laugh at them saying that Dungeons and Dragons teaches that diversity is strength. This is so ridiculous. Dungeons and Dragons teaches shit, okay? People do not go to board games in order to learn about life experiences. Okay, we go to school, we listen to our parents, we listen to our friends. The last place in the world that I want to go to get an education from is Dungeons and Dragons. I would not go to apply for a job and put Dungeons and Dragons on my resumes as skills that I have mastered. Like, again, the level of fart sniffing that you need to have in order to have Dungeons and Dragons and teaches in the whole world is surreal. So, the idea that diversity is strength. Okay, how does it teach this? For only a diverse group of adventurers can overcome many challenges. As a GM, I can tell you that this is sort of true, but not really. The diversity in the group, all it does is it adds drama. And that's a good thing for a storytelling perspective, but especially large groups of players, they're almost like a committee. And committees are very slow at doing anything. And a lot of the time, you're going to see that you're making an interesting story, and some players get the correct gist of it, like they're doing the correct decisions, but the other players drag them back and they start talking and talking over it, and then they change their mind. So it's not necessarily a way of strength. You know what causes strength in Dungeons and Dragons? When one player is the leader and what he says goes, and then the role-playing session just flies through. Like, that's what actually causes strength. It's not the diverse set of voices. A diverse set of voices is a committee. No, seriously, like, think about your previous experiences. Which one was more enjoyable? Which one actually went faster? When you had a group of people that were constantly bickering or arguing, or when they had like one single person that's like, all right, we're doing this, I'm going to listen to your opinions, but we're doing it my way. In other words, like, this is how companies even work. Like, I'm pretty sure that at Wizards of the Coast, this is how things work. Like, they have a CEO that is saying, yeah, we're going to change our game based on ideological grounds, and everyone has to go along with it, right? Like, that's the most effective way. If another way was the most effective, then all companies would do it by now. Because companies also operate in sort of like an evolutionary environment. The strong survive and the weak get to bankrupt. And also, when they say diversity, they don't really mean diversity, because it sounds normal, right? Like, it's the Trojan horse. It's like, yes, a diverse opinion, like, give you more choices, and you can have, like, discussions on the diverse topics, and then you can look at and point towards the one that sounds the most correct. But they don't mean that. They literally mean multiracial. Multiracialism is not a prerequisite for diversity. Multiracialism is something that exists. It doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. It doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It's something that is. And when they talk about diversity, what they mean is, yes, multiracialism, but they also mean stifling of ideas. So, for example, if I were to go there and I would have an opinion different than that of the CEO, I could get fired. Especially if I say it on Twitter, my own privacy, right? Like, the diversity commissioners, they're not there to make the company more multiracial, if you will. No, what it does is it actually acts like a commissar, to reinforce the ideology. And if you want to see this, like, there are articles that point out how diversity doesn't really increase the racial demographics at a company. And there's also companies that use diversity as a form of union busting. And it makes sense if you think about it, because, again, the multiracial aspect isn't positive or negative, it just is. But when you have an ideology that usually flames from the diversity officer that constantly tells people, like, nonstop, it tells them, look, the white man is the one keeping you down. He is responsible. He is all the evil. And then you go to the white person and say, your ancestors have done this to others. You need to repent. You need to become an ally. This erodes the trust and respect that the coworkers have from one another. Now they're not in there together. They're actually, competing interests. And they do this in prisons. They do this in American prisons so that the prisoners are focused on each other rather than to be focused on the guards. But again, like, these conversations that I have to say here are toxic. I don't think I would be able to get a job. Like, my voice would be heard at Wizards of the Coast. I think I would get fired for even suggesting these things, right? So this is what they mean by diversity. But anyway, right now, let's talk about how they're fucking their own game. These people do not understand what makes Dungeons and Dragons Dungeons and Dragons. And I know it sounds ridiculous, like, V, what do you mean, like, Wizards of the Coast doesn't understand? It's like, yeah, I'm wondering, like, how many old people, like the old school, are still working at Wizards of the Coast. Like, you have to understand, like, companies are a brand, but you can have, like, the same brand, and none of the people there that are working have been the original people that made that thing great. An example would be BioWare. Like, how many people that used to work at BioWare from the beginning that did Knights of the Old Republic, or that did, some of the cool games like Mass Effect, still work there today? Or Blizzard Entertainment. How many old people from Blizzard that made Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 still work at Blizzard now? And how influential are they? Because that's the thing, like, a lot of people, they look at the brand and it's like a smoke and mirror. Okay, yes, it's the same name, like the same brand, but the people under that roof aren't the same. Like, think about your house, that you grew up in. When your family moved out, the house is the same, but, like, the atmosphere and the people inside are completely different. So I don't think they understand what makes Dungeons and Dragons Dungeons and Dragons. And this ideology is completely destroying fantasy right now. So what I mean by this, the whole essence of fantasy, when you have Lord of the Rings, or even when you have something like Star Trek, they actually ruined Picard with this ideology. The different races, or the different alien species, they are stereotypes of humanity taken to the extreme. So, for example, you have the dwarves. They're very industrious. They're like the best miners and the best blacksmith. They represent humanity's desire in order to create things, to craft things, and it also is of epic proportions. Like you see a dwarven fortress, and you're like, "Wow, this is so cool." And then you take the elves, and they represent the arts like poetry and music and painting and philosophy, all these things, right? And you have the orcs, and the orcs represent savagery. They're like the barbarians coming down to loot and pillage a city and destroy everything. So why is this a thing? It's racist, right? Of course it's racist. Very racist. Very racist. But it's fictional. It's not hurting anyone. That's the thing. It's fiction. And you can understand in fiction why racism is bad. Like, for example, if you're a person that never experienced it, the first time you play Witcher and you see a dwarf being attacked just because he's a dwarf and people want to cut off his beard, and yeah, you get to feel, yeah, that's kind of messed up. That's not cool, you know? And you as a player get to experience that and you want to help the dwarf. But in Dungeons and Dragons, it's one of the only places where racism is actually great for storytelling because it adds so much drama into it. Like, yes, you do have an orc that is a creature prone to violence. They want to destroy, like it's in their blood. And then you have an elf that is the opposite. And now you can get them in a party and force them to work together in order to destroy the necromancer that is threatening the entire world. And this is what creates really interesting drama. It creates really interesting dynamic and storytelling. How do you get these people that are so different from different cultures to work together and overcome their differences? So that's why fantasy works. That's why it's great. Like now you look at Picard and sci-fi is really the same. Like you have the Vulcans that are logical creatures. They have no emotions. Sometimes they might even seem cruel because they do not understand emotions. They think in numbers. It's like, okay, maybe we should kill 50 people to save 50 million. And then you have the Romulans, and you have the Klingons that they adhere to traditions, and they're also violent people, but they use that violence in order to look at the positive aspects of it, like honor and tradition and all of that thing, right? Now, when you look at Picard, the new Star Trek TV show, every single race acts just like normal humans. Like the Romulans act like humans, and you get to see all these other races, like the Vulcans and whatnot. And you can't really tell the difference. Like the Romulans were speaking with an Irish accent, and they were living on a vineyard, and they were cursing, and they were acting exactly like Picard does. So the question becomes like, why do you even need all these fantasy races then? Well, what is the point? Just go like Battlestar Galactica used to be, and you just have everyone acting like a normal human. So you're destroying what creates fantasy. You're destroying the most important element of fantasy. Like all the drama from Lord of the Rings stems from the fact that the races are different. Then you have like the good races and you have the bad races. And the good races are like the hobbits and the elves, and the bad races are the orcs. Like one of the most interesting aspects of Lord of the Rings was when the hobbits tried to convince the Trents to go to war. The Trents were a race that were quite peaceful. They didn't care about what happens outside of their forest. They weren't involved into any type of conflict. And yet the hobbits, when they mobilized that very powerful force, they managed to defeat Isengard. Or when Aragorn manages to convince the ghosts, right? Like the ghosts, they're also a type of race of undead. And they manage to use them in order to defeat Sauron's armies. And it creates conflict because they have the most powerful force on Middle-earth. They have like the key to actually destroy Sauron. But they can't use that because he made a promise, like, you help us in this battle and we're going to set you free. So now Aragorn has to make a moral decision. Does he take that army into Mordor and destroy Sauron? Which would be really easy, but he would be breaking his vow, and then he would be no better like that undead army, which the reason they were undead is because they were being punished for breaking their vows. And like, it's all of this good storytelling, it's all of this good drama that you're pissing away just because of some bandwagon that happens now in the West, like some ideology that's going to come and go anyway, and you're destroying your company. It's sad to see, because look at here, like we present the orcs and draw in a new light in our recent books. In those books, orcs and draw are just as morally and culturally complex as other people. Yeah, but you just destroy the purpose of the orcs and draw. Like the idea of the draw is that they're very beautiful. They're incredibly beautiful and alluring, but they're also incredibly sadistic. So you get to see a person that is unbelievably beautiful, right? Like a very nice, plump-titted woman, but you know that she's going to do unspeakable things to you if there is an interaction to be had there. And, you know, it creates this disassociation in the head of the player, because we as humans, we usually associate beauty with niceness. Like, beauty is good, evil is ugly. You know, like that type of thing. And you're playing with the person's preconceived notions. And you can't do this if, like, you just water it down. And it's like, well, no, see that beautiful woman, that's a draw right there. Well, no, she can actually be good. She can actually be different than the other draw. And not to mention, like, even if you have, like, the orcs, for example, that are cruel, they're barbarians, they're like a force of nature. And this is, like, from human history, by the way. And it's not, like, racism, because I keep seeing people associate orcs with black people, like, on Twitter. Like, what is wrong with you? How can you look at an orc and you go, like, black person? Like, if you read some of the history of European cultures, you will see that the German tribes used to act in a similar fashion during the Roman Empire. They would have, like, tribes of white people having a kill zone around them. Like, literally, for hundreds of miles, anyone that would encroach on those territories would be killed. And they did this not because they needed resources, not because they needed slaves or anything like that. No, they did this in order to honor the gods, because they viewed honor through combat. Like, this is... all of these things are inspired from elements of human history. They happened. I mean, the Roman Empire, when they would be next to the Germanic forest, every now and then they would have, like, these massive number of people just going out of the forest and killing everyone. Like, for them, it was a sort of human calamity for the Romans that lived there. Like, they would look at the forest with fear because they knew that everything coming out of it can't be good. So, what I'm trying to say is that this creates drama. It creates really good storytelling. If you have a party of people and one of them happens to be, like you manage to find an orc, let's say, and now you need to cooperate with him, and you notice that this orc is different than the others. This orc, while being violent, he realizes that his people are dying through the constant warfare, and this can't go on. Like, he enjoys violence. He likes hitting things with a club, but he also has this epiphany and realizes that this can't go on forever, because all the other races are being turned against the orcs now. They're allying against them, and the orcs' number are starting to dwindle, and he realizes that if this keeps on, the orcs will get extinct. So he tries to work. Like, it's such a rich and complex backstory that you can create from this. And you as a player playing an orc, you can imagine all of these cool things and, you know, try to justify how you're going to work with the elf and the dwarf in order to stop Princess Shira from getting the sort of power. But you know, like, what I mean. And you're removing all of that. Now, again, this is a board game. You know, you can make your stories as you want. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't care what Wizards of the Coast has to say. But this ideology is a sign that there is problem at their company. Like, anyone that thinks differently, I am willing to put down money, cold, hard cash, that they're getting fired for thinking differently. And that's what I'm worried about, because there's going to be talented people that do not agree with their decisions. There are going to be talented people that will speak out, and they will be fired. Or it creates a culture of fear. That's another thing. Like, most of these companies, I speak with people from Ubisoft, from Blizzard, from EA Games, people that don't work in the video gaming industry, but they work at, for example, antivirus companies. You know, a couple of people from Avast. All of them tell me the same thing. Like they're terrified. They're terrorized when they go to work. They're terrified because someone might see what they posted in 2010, or they might say something that someone misconstrues and blah blah blah. So they work in terror, and terror isn't productive for a company. It's not something that brings out the best in people and brings out the creativity. It's like a mini USSR in there. And also, like there's also things that I don't mind. Like don't get me wrong. Like they speak about how they want to create the world, like the humanity, to be diverse and rich, and have like humans of different races and sexual orientations and blah blah blah. I don't have anything against that. I think that's actually cool. Like the bigger the world and the more rich and diverse the cultures, like I might find something that I might like and I might use it. Like no, I don't care if you're going to make diverse humans. But what I do care is like when you take the element of the stereotyping of a race, like for example the orcs, and you're saying, oh no, well not all, like the race of the orcs aren't like that. Like here, blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, but you just destroyed the whole purpose of having the orcs in the first place. Like if they're going to be just like humans, then why have them? Why not just have only humans? Like what's the point? That's my question. Because again, like humans are the ones that in fantasy usually have like different civilizations, and you can find like everything within the human culture. Like you can have a culture of humans that focus on mages, and they have like a dictatorship over there, and then you can have a culture of humans that have a democracy. Like you can do this with humans in the fantasy element, but you shouldn't be able to do this with orcs. Like you need a race of bad guys that you can just clobber, and the player characters feel heroic while doing it, and they don't feel bad for clobbering them. And there is no moral question whether we should clobber them or not. Like that's the purpose of the orcs. Anyway, right, let me know what you think. I'm generally curious if you agree with me or not. So my thesis is that I suppose you can say, yes, in fiction, racism in fiction works the best in fantasy genres, like Dungeons and Dragons, like Star Trek, and without it, the genre just doesn't make sense anymore. You might as well just have Battlestar Galactica. You might as well just have Game of Thrones, where everyone is a human, and you don't need the other races. Humans are diverse. Other races aren't meant to be diverse. They're meant to be stereotypical. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section.